What up, guys, and welcome back to Thomas Reacts here on the 360 Experience with myself, Thomas Mabaso. As we go to 2024 elections, the coalition has been one topic that a lot of people have been talking about, because there are people who believe that the ANC will not win in outright majority, even though that their representatives, the likes of Fikile Mbalula and President Ramaphosa, are talking about the outright majority. But a lot of people, they don't believe that the ANC can still win the elections in an outright majority. We've seen the parties like the Democratic Alliance have managed to pull some of the smaller political parties to form a multi-charter party that is seeks to unseat the ANC from the presidency. And we know that the party and the charter have also agreed that they will not go into a coalition talks with the ANC and the economic freedom fighters, and to some extent Petrolic Alliance. So guys, on this interview, Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh has invited the spokesperson of the African National Congress and some of the representatives from the MultiParty Charter to actually talk about what is it that they think is going to happen in 2024 after the elections. So guys, I hope that you are going to stay with me. It is going to be quite a lengthy video, but I hope that you got your drinks, I hope that you got your snacks, so you know how we roll on this program. And let's hear what the African National Congress and the MultiParty Charter has for us.
Welcome back to Unfiltered, and let's get into our conversation with our panel. Ms. Bengu Mutsiri, what's the ANC's reaction to the announcement of this multi-party charter and recent pronouncements today that they have agreed on certain principles that unite them?
Well, in our view, multipartyism is very core to South Africa's constitutional democracy. And so from that perspective, as a governing party, we really have nothing to be concerned about in as far as that principle is concerned. And we also do think that there is nothing wrong with opposition parties coming together to talk about the African National Congress, what's and all. So that's our starting point. We are a 111 years old organization. Surely we've learned to be able to absorb any shock, and this is not a shock for us. We are not deterred by it, and this is not to be dismissive of it. I think every interest group in South Africa has got a right, to come together and talk about the ANC and about what it wants to do about the ANC or what it feels about the ANC. But I must say that we are really focused on reconnecting with our base, on addressing the challenges that the people of South Africa face, and our focus is on that. What happened at the Emperor's Palace, it certainly cannot be anything likened to CODESA. That's the only thing I want to correct. CODESA.
And I must say that the ANC has done a really good job when it comes to answering this question about how the multi-party or the Moon Pact affects them by constantly saying that they are only focusing on gathering enough support for the ANC to win in an outright majority. I think they've done a wonderful job when it comes to actually answering this question, because I know that a lot of journalists wanted to know how the ANC members really feel about this multi-party charter. But I think the ANC as an organization, they've spoke about this thing and they've actually relayed an answer to everyone who's going to be asked about this whole thing. Because if you listen to what Mahlengi is talking about, and if you listen to what the president has been talking about recently, it's the same lines. We don't care about the Moon Pact short. The only thing that we care about is actually garnering enough support for the South Africans and for the ANC to actually win the presidency in 2024. I think it is a very smart way of actually going and attacking this whole question, because the South African media, we know how it's like. They want those sound bites, they want those controversial sound bites, but I think the ANC for now has done a wonderful job when it comes to actually depriving them of getting those sound bites.
So it was a very historic moment, and some of the parties that were gathered there even led some artillery to actually break down CODESA. So surely it cannot be likened to CODESA. That would really be a travesty. But apart from that, the ANC notes the Moonshot Pact, and I'm sure it is for South Africans to study it in the fullness of time.
Mr. Kwankwa, can I come to you and get your assessment? The UDM attended the dialogue convened by the government led by Deputy President Mashadile and UWC. You didn't attend this grouping that's recently been meeting over the last 2 days. Why is that?
Well, firstly, I think we don't want to go to the moon with anyone. We have always been part of the forum of opposition parties. The party leader general has chaired many meetings of the forum of opposition parties where we discuss issues of pre-coalition agreements, cooperation on matters of principle and so on. And by the time the Democratic Alliance called for this moonshot, whatever they want to call it, we were on the verge of actually sitting down as sister opposition parties to say what kind of coalition agreement, pre-elections coalition agreement can we come up with. But at the same time, look, for us as a party, we are guided by principles. We are not in the business of ganging up against any political party. We are in the business of saying if we want to, in good faith, to develop pre-coalition agreements, that's what we must do. Develop and establish the principles around which we can form those coalition agreements. But also we have a problem in general with the largest parties, trying to scapegoat smaller parties for the failures and the instability of coalitions at local government level, when in fact they are at the core of that instability. It's usually the largest parties that can't stand each other at that level, that prefer them to put someone who's a puppet. They will consider in the majority of instances from smaller parties to run the government. And as soon as there are problems in those municipalities, they start shifting blame to smaller parties, when smaller parties don't actually have the numbers to be able to effect many of the decisions that are taken at local government level. So it's unadulterated claptrap. The other issue is you can't artificially seek to legislate other parties out of existence by coming up with this nonsensical threshold. The threshold is brought about as a solution to instability, which is very superficial, which is very shallow understanding of the political dynamics at local government level, and which, if we are true and honest to ourselves and we want to come up with a model that would work and ensure stability, we need to have a comprehensive discussion around these issues. So we see no reason why there should be a duplication of structures. There's a forum of opposition parties. The forum of opposition parties is the collective coming together to develop their own program. We can't now all of a sudden be like we're a satellite branch of the TA that calls us into one room and it says we have a vision and then we must be party to that. That's not how the UDA works.
Mr. Emam, what are your views on this gathering today? Of course, you also aren't there. And what are your views of this attempt, one of many, to unite opposition parties going into the 2024 election?
Well, thank you very much. Let me start off by saying I have attended at least 12 out of the 14 meetings. There is no doubt, and you'll notice that I think only today they came up with the actual name multi-party. I think for many meetings the discussion was about from Moonshot Pact and who it belongs to, who it's aligned to, who identifies with that name. So that took about 12 meetings before, of course, they agreed on this. So that will tell you what to expect, particularly with this coalition agreement. But having said that, and what we can't run away from is the fact that in the country at the moment we are going through very trying times. But I have a problem when we have an obsession which is what they are prioritizing at this point in time, and that is to remove another party like the ANC. Now, I don't believe that is the right approach. Rather than addressing the concerns and the challenges that we face in the country.
Exactly what Sheik Emam is what Honorable Sheik Emam is talking about is something that people have been talking about, because a lot of people have been complaining about this issue of the DA and the Moon Pact coming out, and the first thing that they say is that they want to unseat the ANC. So people feel like their intentions are not genuine. They feel like the DA, they just want to unseat the ANC so that they can claim themselves as kings in South Africa, instead of actually talking about the policies and what is it that they are going to do for South Africans. So what Sheik Emam is talking about, it's what people have been noting when it comes to this multi-party charter, that the first thing that they talk about is unseating ANC. It's almost as if they have this obsession of unseating the ANC, because And I mean, like, their obsession is supposed to be making the lives of South Africans better instead of just unseating the ANC. So I think the way they approach the whole thing, it's a bit shaky to many people, man.
Rather than concentrating on this obsession, and I've seen it in the last couple of years in Parliament, just attack, and attack, rather than finding common ground, okay, in order to address the state of the country. But more importantly, let's look at this particular case. The obsession is we want to remove the ANC, and we don't want the ANC and the EFF to be able to govern this country. Everybody has their reasons why they want it and why they don't want it. Now, don't you think this coalition, this multi-party thing, is creating a conducive environment for the ANC? Let's assume the ANC loses a certain percentage and the EFF loses a percentage of the voters. But if they make the 51%, then what is this multi-party coalition that they're talking about going to achieve? So I think instead of rather addressing the concerns and taking South Africa forward and dealing with the loopholes that exist in the country, they are obsessed in wanting to remove others from power. So I think they need to move their focus of attention from that and ask the question, who can we work with that will take South Africa forward?
Right.
And lastly,
I'll come back to you, Mr. Emam, and we have a long discussion today as well. But let me bring in our analyst voice, Mr. Swana. Can I put something to you that there's been a lot of hullabaloo about what's been happening over the last 2 days. But quite frankly, it's 7 parties that, don't command right now anywhere even close to 40, but let's say they got 40. They just don't have the power to reshape South Africa at the moment yet. And maybe there's a bit too much hysteria about what's happening when, quite frankly, it isn't a big deal. What do you think about that view? Or do you think, like many other analysts have said, this could be a watershed moment for South Africa's politics, and this really represents something new going forward?
I think there has been a warning to this group from Conor Mulder of the Freedom Front Plus. The last time I met with him, he said that when we were in the same room, he said that this is 35%. What they are representing is 35%. And to get from that 35% to 51% is going to be extremely difficult. The parties that are part of this movement on their own cannot do it. So they need something like a UDF. That is his terminology. So statistically, at this point in time, there's nothing that is earth-shattering about what is going on there. But historically, I think you have to look at it differently. I may make a statement, perhaps a mischievous one, and say there was a fellow who came along and said the ANC will rule until Jesus Christ comes back. In the 2016 election, I was phoned by Bele, and he said to me, Jesus has come back in Port Elizabeth, and the ANC had lost the majority, and it continued to lose majority even in the last election. The ANC is on the point of losing majority in Gauteng, for instance, and that would be a decisive, a historical moment. It would definitely be a historical, and it's not out of reach, not in the manner that Helen Zille is defining it. The ANC is governing with an assortment of coalitions all over the show because it has lost majority. That is a fall from the 69.69% that was achieved in 2004 to where we are today, to the point where by 2021 they had reached 45% or so. So the ANC is no longer, statistically speaking, a party that is a majority party. We expect that it will be one of the parties, which is why, personally, if I was in this industry, I wouldn't use the term opposition parties because we're basically equals. There's nobody who's got a majority here. And even if the ANC had a majority, I wouldn't want to be part of an opposition party.
Could I ask you on that? Because I think you make an important point that the election is definitely set to be...
Exactly, man. Like, okay, let's say the ANC wins. And if the ANC wins, they try to call some of these parties that are in the Moon Pact to put their votes in so that they can govern all of them together. Like the question comes, like, those guys who are in the Moon Pact, are they going there to decide to be the opposition party instead of just going into coalition with the ANC? Because let's say out of all these parties, if the ANC gets most of the votes, which is most likely to happen, which means the ANC is most likely to make the decisions on who is going to work with. So if the ANC wants to work with IFP, or maybe let's say the ANC calls, what was this party? I know Herman Mashaba said that he's personally not going to work with the ANC, but if the Action SA wants to do it, then he will have to step aside. So I think Herman Mashaba knows that it might happen that the ANC might call Action SA and say, guy, come here, let's put in our votes together and let's run this country. I don't think Action SA is going to miss on the chance of actually being in governance just because Herman Mashaba don't want to work with the ANC. Herman Mashaba has made it clear that if it comes to that, he will have to step aside. So these parties, they will have to really understand and make a decision that whatever happens, if the ANC wins, they're gonna stay in oppositions.
Be a different kind of election to the one that we've seen. But I think the question for me is about the parties who were at this convention today and whether they will actually be the arbiters. What do you make of who was there and who wasn't there, and what we read into that beyond the statements that we heard for the cameras today?
So if we were to follow Corne Mulder again, when the likes of Alan Pusak and others formed the UDF in around 83 and so on, it changed the history of this country. And part of why it changed the history of this country is who joined the UDF. This, at best, this is embryonic. This charter, this multi-party charter, as a political entity, it is embryonic. It's not something that can be put into if it was boxing, you can't take this and put it in the boxing ring. It is no match for the people that are in this industry. So from that point of view, as I've already said, there are people who, if you wanted to play serious politics, who would have needed to be there and who are not there. So from that point of view,
I also wonder how the DA expects this whole thing to work out, because for the past 2 elections the DA has been going down. It has been on a very steady decline. So I wonder how they expect this whole thing to happen, because if you look at how things are right now, it clearly looks like John Steenhuisen is going to get less votes than Mmusi Maimane, which is going to make the whole Moon Pact thing useless, guys. Seriously, I believe that is going to make the whole thing useless, because it would have made sense if maybe the DA last elections was performing much better than this election. They are promising to perform much better. Than they're gonna call all of these parties so that they can maybe they can possibly have enough numbers to run South Africa. But right now the DA is on a deadline. It's on a deadline. He knows that individually, maybe let's say without this whole multi-party charter thing, the DA is going down. The DA is going down. It has been going down for a long time right now. So it makes no sense to me, because the DA it might get less numbers than they got last election. So how are they going to win the outright majority to govern South Africa? Even with these parties, man, you can see these parties, UIM, IFP, and all of these parties. Those are not, maybe you can say, popular parties. They are not as popular. So how are they going to... I don't understand how they think the whole thing is going to happen, man. I don't know. Maybe the DA thinks under John Steenhuisen they are going to do better, but I honestly don't believe that they are going to do better under John Steenhuisen, guys.
Gumede and company still need to persuade the real players to join this game. The DA is probably at about 20% and is unlikely to move beyond that 20%.
Exactly.
So, and I think Kone Mulder is correct in saying we need another force altogether. And to be more direct about this, if you don't know how to mobilize black supporters from the townships and the villages, you are not going to rule this country. Finish and fly.
Let's leave it there for now. We're going to take a break. We're discussing coalitions in South Africa and the various proposals that have emerged over the last few weeks. After the break, we come to some of the other proposals for coalitions. Don't go anywhere as we explore those.
You hear what the analyst just said, guys. The DA is having a real problem with garnering enough support garnering enough black support in the country. And if you can't do that, you cannot run South Africa. So I don't know how the DA is expecting this whole thing to turn out, because they are not going to do like last time. Like he said, that like they made what, like 1920. I don't think that like out of the blue the DA will come out and score 37 or something like that. It is not going to happen, man. Chances are the DA might get 15 on this election, because the DA is not as lively as it was before. It's not as appealing as it was before, all thanks to John Steenhuisen. It's not a party that people look at for an alternative. Like that's why a lot of people right now are looking at the EFF. It's because the DA is not appealing to them. The DA is not appealing to people on the ground.
Welcome back to Unfiltered. We're in conversation about coalitions, pacts, and the nascent agreements that seem to be forming around the 2024 election. Ms. Bengu Mutsiri, before we went to the break, we were still discussing the MultiParty Charter. I want to move on to the convention that happened a few weeks ago to discuss coalition governments led by the Deputy President. But please also feel free to respond to the discussion as it unfolds, and that invitation, of course, is open to all the panelists.
Well, I suppose I want to just take a bite at this idea of invoking the UDF in a manner that is very ahistorical, in a manner that also compares what the moment that unfolded in the past 2 days to the foundations of the United Democratic Front. Quite ahistorical, lacking in a sense of history in terms of how the UDF came about. There is nothing in the parties that have converged, not even a semblance of that connectedness to what in the ANC we call the motive forces of society. Black people in general, Africans in particular, farm workers, miners, the youth, the women. In fact, you actually had even an assembly of men on that platform. That should tell you a lot about how the lack of genderedness of that convention. Perhaps the women are still going to come to the fore. But I'm not there. I just thought it's important to debunk this myth about the UDF and to debunk the myth about CODESA. And to also say that this is not the first attempt, by those that want to be a bulwark against what is perceived as ANC power in society, regardless of where we stand, Mr. Siswana, in relation to percentages. But we know that the 2019 election, when the IEC made a declaration about who has won, the ANC emerged. We can talk about how our power has been diffused and neutralized through our own coalition arrangements and also through our own goals. And this is the thing that the ANC never shies away from talking about, by the way. But I just wanted to correct the thing about the historical facts, because that form part of our legacy and our liberation heritage.
Mr. Swana, maybe I will come to you, Mr. Kwankwa, but just because it was a response to your point, is UDF analogizing maybe...
In fact,
This was not my statement. This is Kodemulda's statement. This is Kodemulda's statement.
Yeah.
So I've got nothing further to say about it.
Okay. Well, Mr. Kwankwa, you had something to say, so feel free to come in at this juncture.
Well, I think that what needs to happen is still a broader discussion among sister opposition parties in particular, and involving various stakeholders in society to see what kind of roadmap we can develop going to elections, instead of parties, individual political parties, opportunistically trying to consolidate their political power base by treating other political parties as satellite branches. I want to correct you, Sizwe. I saw the list of parties which, according to the screen that you showed before the break, that are part of Moonshot members. The UDM is not part of it at all. We've invited John and the Democratic Alliance and other sister opposition parties to come back to the Forum of Opposition Parties, which was established a long time ago, long before I became a member of Parliament, where we discuss issues of common interest as political parties. But I think, coming back to the question you asked about the dialogue, we went to the dialogue in good faith, and we made the contribution. I saw it in one of the insets right at the beginning of the program. There was an inset where we were quoting my party leader about the submissions that the party made during that dialogue. But what disappointed us greatly was to hear during one of the roundtable or sofa discussions that the government called us to a dialogue where they'd already drafted a bill, and the bill was before the department quite, I think, sometime last year, when we actually did our own research to find out as to how far that process was. I mean, it means the whole dialogue was not called in good faith. But also, it's a political dialogue. I expected to have a roundtable discussion instead of us addressing one another or speaking past each other, because there was no platform either where the proposals that were made by various political parties were processed, or that were able to persuade one another to say these are some of the proposals we're putting on the table. If we look at other jurisdictions, for example, Sizwe, you go to Kenya, there's a registrar where a coalition agreement is legally binding. It locks you into that agreement for whatever period you've agreed upon. And those members are supposed to respect the spirit of that agreement. If there is an issue, that matter can be escalated to the registrar, which is a legal body, a constitutional body in some jurisdictions. In other parts of the world, there's rotation. For example, rotation as to who's going to lead the coalition for whatever period. There are many things or many options that we can look at around the world in trying to ensure the stability of coalition governments in our country, even when you move to national level. What we have an issue with is that by the governing parties trying to say that we need a threshold of some kind, and this proposal comes in response to instability at local government level. What does it seek to suggest? It says smaller party leaders have the problem, or smaller parties have the problem, so get them out of the system and then you'll be able to get stability. But it also seeks to suggest that those of us who lead smaller parties are stupid and incapable of being able to run stable governments working with colleagues at the local government level. So we still need to have a more comprehensive discussion, come up with clear proposals as well, we want to address this issue. But what we take great exception to is that the so-called moonshot and whatever process they're undertaking, which is good for opposition, but I think it has been done opportunistically by the DA, a DA that could not actually advance this discussion internally in the Forum of Opposition Parties. And that forum is not, by the way, chaired by the General. The chairship of that forum is rotational. Any party that proposes an issue can convene all opposition parties, advance its issues, persuade each other until we develop a common approach to issues.
Let's put some of what you've said there, Mr. Kwankwa, to Mr. Emam. And Mr. Emam, what do you make of some of the proposals that came out of that national dialogue led by the Deputy President about the way that the Municipal Structures Act may be changed, and some of the regulations and legislative proposals around coalition governments? Do you think that some of these proposals are wise, or are you equally worried about the way that bigger parties seem to be attempting to entrench their dominance over the political landscape?
Yeah, let me start off by concurring with my colleague, Honorable Kwankwa. Actually, I was equally disappointed that the understanding was we're going to this dialogue initiated by the Deputy President. We were going to engage, deliberate, and come up with a common understanding of what we believe collectively can take South Africa forward in terms of coalition, only to be surprised when the Deputy Minister of Koktaring then pointed out that there was already a bill signed by the Minister. Now that was very disappointing because it simply meant that what they were expecting us to do is go here and rubber stamp what was going to happen. But I think we need to ask ourselves a very important question. Why do political parties enter into coalition governments? Now my understanding is for two reasons. One is, and that is what it should be, is to enhance the delivery of services, improve the quality of life of our people. And the second one is, of course, for power, control, and the financial resources. And that is why in our submission, we made it very clear. In fact, if you want coalition governments in South Africa to survive, then you have to separate politics from administration. Now, some will argue that that is the way it is, there is separation of powers. Clearly, in practice, it is not the case. The reason why coalition governments are collapsing, and can you see large political parties who now want to put thresholds, very conveniently in coalition governments can take a one party, one member party, and make that person the mayor of the financial hub of the whole of Africa. So it's not about quality, it's not about ethics, it's not about fit for purpose, it's about the power and control and the financial resource. So we made a submission. If you can ensure that no politician or political party has anything to do with appointments, I've just come back, with Honorable Kwankwa, from the Irish Parliament, and that is why it's successful with a minority government being in place, that no politician has anything to do with procurement and tenders. Let me remind you that this country loses hundreds of billions of rands a year alone, starting from local government, because you don't get value for money. And political parties, whoever they are, wherever they are governed, all of them, wherever they govern, are sustaining themselves through this unlawful means. And the second one, of course, is the cadre deployment, where mayors and speakers decide who municipal managers. Now, I can tell you that is the reason why coalition government, no matter who you work with, unless you change that, is not going to be successful in South Africa.
Right.
But very importantly,
let's leave it there for now, Mr. Emam, because we've got to go to a break. After the break, we'll ask Mr. Swana, when we begin, about some of the other potential coalition arrangements, because pacts and multi-party pacts are only for multi-party democracy.
So what do you guys think? Do you think that do you think that South Africa right now, we are ready for these coalition governments? Man, these guys, they cannot agree on anything. These guys, they cannot agree on anything. Because the only positive thing that I can say from the Moon Pact thing is that at least they've managed to agree on something. But when you look at all these other political parties, and when they talk about coalition, it is going to be hard for them to agree on anything. So is the Moon Pact essentially better for South Africa? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But one thing I can say is that at least the Moon Pact, they've agreed on something. They've managed to agree on something. They've managed to put some policies down and agree on them. But if you look at all of these other political parties, man, it's going to be a struggle. It is going to be hard.
Mr. Swana, let me first avoid attributing Freedom Front Plus quotations to you, the segment, and ask you a very serious question here. Are these multi-party pacts all they're cracked up to be, or really are we going to see the big players on our political landscape by electoral support actually coming together? And there's one particular configuration that has been the talk of the political town, a grand coalition between the ANC and the DA, which both sides have not categorically ruled out. What do you make of this interesting development on the national stage?
Just like Sheik Emam said, that these guys, the only thing that they want is power. I think if the ANC they still have a potential of working with the DA. They still have a potential of working with the EFF. That's why I say I don't believe when politicians come out and start saying that they are not going to work with certain political parties. I hate it when the members of the DA say they are not going to work with the EFF, they are not going to work with the ANC, because when it comes negotiation time, these guys are going to negotiate with each other. Even the whole thing of ANC and the DA, for the fact that they cannot outrightly deny working with each other, like, it simply shows you that the door is open. The door is open for negotiations, and if the ANC and the DA come to some sort of an agreement, they are going to work together. They are going to work together. All these guys that are there with the multi-party charter and everything, the DA will dump them like a hot potato. If the ANC says, guys, come, let's run the country together, they are going to go there and help the ANC run the country, because that's what they want at the end of the day. They want to be in government. That's what they want. That's what the DA wants. So if the parties that the DA has called cannot give them that, if the ANC says, the DA come and let's figure this thing out, the DA is going to come. Just like with the EFF is going to come. If the ANC says, Malema, come, let's run South Africa together, Malema is going to come. So don't believe these guys when they say they're not going to work with each other. Don't believe all these negotiation talks before the elections are even held. But this thing is not even holding. All of those parties that are there with the DA under the Moon Pact, the DA is going to drop them so fast. The DA has previously worked with the EFF. The DA has previously worked with the ANC. There's nothing that these guys, like, they cannot surprise me. I will never be surprised if I hear like the DA and the EFF have reached some consensus. I will never be surprised if those guys reach an agreement, because I know that they have previously worked together before. Despite people saying that these guys will never work with each other, these guys, they hate each other. But what do? They work with each other at the end of the day, because what? They are going to power. They are going to power. Power is corrupt, guys. Power is very corrupt. We must never allow these guys to lie to us. Power is very corrupt, guys.
Let me say this first, that I think that if I was in the political industry, I would oppose thresholds to the last man standing. It's wrong. It will take this country to hell. Coming to your question, within the African National Congress, you have people who have romantic ambitions relative to the DA. Within the liberal community and what I call the mercantilistic community, people who think about money, South Africa, just reduce everything to rands and cents, who think that they can make more money if the DA and the ANC came together. So within the DA itself, within the mercantilistic communities and the liberal community, the like of Anne Bernstein and so on, they have romantic ideas that this could be a nice match. So that idea is there, and the people who are raising objections to this is not far-fetched. There is good reason to raise objection to this.
Why do you think there's good reason to object?
What I'm saying is that maybe objection is another issue, but suspicion that the DA could be part of the Moon Pact or the multi-party charter, if you like it that way, but on the other hand, romancing the ANC.
Exactly, guys. This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. This is exactly what I'm saying. The DA just wants to be in power, man. They don't care how they get there, man. All these guys in the multi-party, man, if they think the DA cares about them, the DA doesn't give a shit about them. The DA doesn't give a shit about them. The ANC is desperate to be in power, man. If push comes to shove, and the ANC will have to call the DA, but they are going to call the DA, and the DA will not hesitate to come. They guys, there's a huge possibility of the ANC running South Africa with the DA next year, despite everything that has been said. All this multi-party charter, all this Moon Pact shit, it might not matter then. It is not going to matter then.
And if this for any reason they don't get the 50+1, the DA will walk with a clear conscience to go and partner with the ANC. And I'm not saying this is a dominant view in the ANC. I am saying there are people like that, and there are some of them.
It's a really interesting point, because one thing the DA may be trying to do here is have its bread buttered on both sides, so that it could go one way or another, but actually not categorically state which way it's going, leaving its options open for the election.
That is exactly how I read the statement prepared by Steenhuisen, because Steenhuisen says, if we don't get the 50+1, there's nothing to be discussed. The coalition, their charter actually dissolves automatically. Now, if I may once again, perhaps provocatively, use the UDF again. This is Kone Mulder's idea from their point of view. This is not my point of view, it's their point of view. The UDF, you could not be in the UDF and be in the Bantustan at the same time, or in the apartheid regime at the same time, right? So Steenhuisen and some of his members, especially Steenhuisen and the DA, are not prepared to die for this charter. The people of the UDF, the original UDF, were prepared to die for it. They had no alternative. So there's a lack of commitment.
Interesting provocations there.
The Democratic Alliance will never sacrifice its chance of being in governance for this charter, man. They will never. That's why John Steenhuisen said if we don't get 51+, immediately we are dissolving, because he knows that he's talking with everyone. These guys are talking with each other, guys. So next year it's going to be very upsetting to a lot of people, because there are people who are going to vote for the EFF, maybe to kick out the DA. There are people going to vote for the ANC, maybe to keep up the DA. But at the end of the day, these guys might work together. The door is open for these guys to work together, guys. There's a huge possibility of these guys working together. So that's why I say I will keep emphasizing it, that people must not be fooled by these political parties coming here with all these proposals and everything, because when it's crunch time, everyone is going to negotiate with everyone. Everyone is going to negotiate with everyone. All this, I will never work with the EFF, I will never work with the DA, I will never work with the ANC nonsense, will be out of the window. Everyone, it is going to negotiate with everyone. Come 2024, everyone's going to negotiate with everyone. Mark this video.
Mutsiri, the head of the Veterans League, Mr. Snuki Zigalala, on multiple occasions now has not categorically ruled out, in fact, I would say has opened the door in many ways for a conversation with the DA. How do you respond to this, at least, entertainment of a grand coalition with the DA? Is it something you as the ANC would completely rule out, or are you really thinking about it seriously?
We are not thinking about it seriously. I'm not going to speak for the president of the Veterans League. The veterans are a very strong body of opinion within the ANC, autonomous body for that matter, just as the Youth League yesterday.
The president of the Veterans League was there at Biz News talking with Eric Hogg, I think, talking about they are not going to work with the EFF, but there's a huge possibility of them working with the DA. So the Mrs. ANC representative, you might sit there and pretend like you know nothing about this thing, but you know, because I don't believe that the president of the Veterans League can go on such a big platform and talk about the huge possibility of working with the DA instead of the EFF, and you are going to come here and say that the ANC is not thinking about it, man. We are not kids, man.
Pronounced on something else about, or the other day about Minister Pravin Gordhan. Those are parts of the mother body, but they do have that kind of autonomy. I do wish to, in part, agree that there will always be an exploration of options that are available to the African National Congress. But this is within, it's not just willy-nilly by an individual, and any individual that walks away from our coalition's framework and articulate their own perspectives outside of that, then they are not operating within the framework of the ANC. The ANC has a coalition's framework. We are prepared to work with parties that are going to endorse certain principles. For example, transformation. Parties So you will judge for yourself. Any party that says we must do away with employment equity in South Africa, any party that says we must do away with affirmative action, any party that says we must do away with access to health care for the poorest of the poor through the national health insurance. I'm just giving some of those examples. I doubt very much that the ANC will go into an arrangement with those parties. And I'm now stating the official positions of the African National Congress. That's the one thing. So this is now back to your earlier question around coalition.
And when ANC talk about transformation, what kind of a transformation are they talking about, man? The ANC loves coming out and talk about transformation, but what is it? What kind of a transformation are they talking about? What is it that the ANC has transformed in South Africa, man?
Our approach to coalitions. Back to the issue of the dialogue, because I think it is important to state the position of the ANC. I think the ANC's approach as the governing party and the incumbent government through our deployees there was that let's support this dialogue. It is important for South Africa as a democracy 30 years later to come to a conversation about how to manage coalitions for the stability of the nation, for the sake of democracy and institution building.
Do you see it as a success? Do you think that you achieved that aim?
Well, I think that's a government call to make. I'm just now speaking as the ANC. I do think, though, that our approach is that this, certainly from the perspective of the ANC, is an initiation of a process. I don't want to talk about the fact that there's a bill that had already been put together, because I think that belongs to COGTA to talk about. But the spirit and the intent of the African National Congress is let's get into a dialogue with all political formations in society so that we stabilize democracy. And in any case, so that we can benchmark also about other excellent, where there exist examples of coalitions that have worked because they had to be supported by some kind of a framework in the country. So that is the position of the African National Congress.
And also the position of the African National Congress is to win with outright majority. Man, I don't know how the ANC is going to do that, man. Honestly, guys, I don't know how the ANC is going to win with an outright majority in 2024. Because this is something that they've been talking a lot about. I don't know how they are going to do that. But I know that these guys, the ANC, they have proven that they will do anything to be in power. I think South Africans are going to be upset. In 2024, I believe that South Africans are going to be upset, man. People are going to see people who they didn't vote for are sent to power. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. That is the same thing that people have been saying about Herman Mashaba, man. They say that, Herman Mashaba, we followed you because you dumped the Democratic Alliance. But here you are talking about donating all your votes to the DA to run the country. So why the hell did you open your own party if you were still going to go out there and help the DA? Why didn't you stay in the DA and help the DA from within? We also heard that the MultiParty Charter, they are also talking with Musi Maimane. And judging with how Musi Maimane has been talking, judging with how he sees things, I will not be surprised if Musi Maimane actually agrees to be part of this MultiParty Charter thing, man. So these are the issues that are going to frustrate a lot of South Africans comes 2024, because I don't believe that members of the Action SA particularly like the idea of Action SA working with the DA after their leader dumped the Democratic Alliance. I don't think they like that idea.
Imam, can I come to you and just ask about this question of the ANC-DA Grand Coalition? I know that sometimes the parliamentary walls have ears. What are your views on this, and do you think this is a serious proposal going on, maybe behind closed doors?
Let me start off by saying that I personally have over 10, 15 times raised this in Parliament, that in the interest of the country, rather than attacking each other, perhaps the DA and ANC should put their differences aside and work together for the common good of the country.
Why do you think that would be a good thing?
But it would be a good thing in the interest of the country. However, We must be mindful of the fact that they have different policies, different visions, different ideologies. It's not going to be easy. But in my observation, in the 9.5 years that I am there, everybody, every politician.
But even if the ANC and the DA wants to work for the goodness of South Africa, I don't think they will work. Man, their policies are dark and are day and night, man. Their policies are too different. Because what ANC advocates for is what the DA will never advocate for. Number one, they will never agree on the issue of land. They will never agree on the issue of a state bank. They will never agree on the issue of nationalization. Those are the issues that they will never agree on. Those are the issues that the DA will rather die instead of seeing white people lose their land, man. The DA will never agree to that. So I don't see how the DA and the ANC can work together for the betterment of South Africa, man. Maybe they can come together to rob the country, maybe to be some corrupt power parties, but I don't believe that they can work for the betterment of South Africa, because when it comes to their policies are too different. They are too different, and both parties are too stubborn and too arrogant. I don't think any of them will be willing to make any sacrifices or like I don't believe that, guys.
Political party, that is represented in the National Assembly wants power and control. That is what prompted me at one stage to say maybe we need a government of national unity in the interest of the country to bring it back online. So I cannot see a DA-ANC working, although I think it might have been a good thing to take South Africa forward given the situation we find ourselves in. And I think we are absolutely correct, and our learned friend is correct. The DA is on the fence. Either way, it's going to be a win-win situation for them. They will either go with the ANC and want to go with the ANC if they don't get that 51%, which is highly unlikely they're going to get in any event. And if they do get anything, of course, then they want to lead. That's what it is all about. So it's all about self-interest, power and control. It's not about wanting to address and take South Africa forward. That is our view. I really don't think it will work.
And the strategy...
Yes, we have to go to a break soon, so if you wouldn't mind being brief, I'll come back to you as we start after the break.
Must I be brief now?
Yes, please.
And the strategy... Okay, no problem. The strategy of the DA really, I concur with the political analyst. The strategy of the DA really is to sit on the fence, but on the one hand, flirt with the ANC. On the other, seek to legislate smaller parties out of existence because they consider them to be an inconvenience. And then thirdly, demonize the EFF in the eyes of the public. Use the boogeyman approach and say, no, you can't work with this, they are not patriotic and so on. That then naturally paves the way for them to have a coalition government with the ANC in the event that the ANC is not able to form coalition governments with the other people. So they are trying to pave the way for them to work with the African National Congress. And look, as the UDM would like to see them working, I don't know how they are going to deal with the ideological schizophrenia that they'll be suffering from in that coalition government. But it would be great to actually look at it and see how far it's going to take them in the country.
On that note of mental maladies, let us pause for a break. We'll come back and ask Mr. Kwankwa and other panelists where to from here and what is the path forward for the future as we move swiftly towards the 2024 election. Fascinating panel.
Hey, but the DA is working very hard, man. For this 2024, the DA is working very hard, man. I don't think the DA demonizing the EFF will work, man. I don't. That's why Kongo is telling the truth when he says that the DA is already paving the way to go there and work with the ANC by demonizing the EFF, even though the EFF is not even in government, man. One would thought that the DA would take all their power to demonize the ANC because the ANC, they are in power, but they are demonizing the EFF. They are demonizing the EFF instead of going after the ANC, the same ANC that is in power, the same ANC that is actually plundering South Africa right now. They are not going after the ANC, they are going after the EFF. They know that South Africans, they still love the ANC. So whoever runs South Africa next is going to do that with the help of the ANC. So they cannot be on the bad books of the ANC. So it's better to go after the EFF because maybe there are chances that the EFF might grow, because the EFF has grown for the past 2 elections. It has grown a lot. There are chances that it may grow, but not a lot. So the DA is actually paving the way to work with the ANC. These politicians are devious, man.
Of analysts and political party leaders. Mr. Kwankwa, before we left, you were talking about the ANC and DA potential pact that's going on. What about the ANC and the EFF? The EFF has been left out of this multi-party charter, but it governs in coalition with the ANC in many cities. What do you think about their position in this particular question? And could we have another scenario which is simply an ANC EFF alliance nationally? Just to remind viewers, just as with the DA and Action SA, we did invite the EFF who couldn't join us tonight. But I'm interested in your views there too.
Well, Sizwe, I think that question would be more appropriate for the political analyst, since I can't answer or be the spokesperson of the EFF. But I think that is a possibility because the two parties have worked well in some areas across the country. And look, it's a matter that the two political parties, the ANC and the EFF, would have to trash out going to the 2024 elections. I mean, the EFF has its own strategies and ways of doing things, and we have to respect that. And so does the ANC. But what we're interested in as the UDM, I think it would be a matter of saying, if you remember, when some of the opposition parties did not want to be part of the Moon Pact, or Moonshot, I don't know what it's called, John said the door is still open for other parties. I want to make this appeal to all the sister opposition parties and say the door is still open for them to come to the forum of opposition parties so that we have a broader discussion about how to tackle this issue, so that we also trash out a pre-coalition agreement if needs be, or look at different scenarios, so that because what happens in South Africa in the majority of instances is it's almost like we did not know that we're going into an election. We're always caught with our pants down after the election. The first coalition agreement that we had was dealt mainly with, it dealt with huge detail. It did not have to do with policy and programmatic issues. Why? Because we could not have the discussion before elections, and it was too sensitive to have those issues, though there are ideological differences after elections. We must learn from our mistakes. The other issues is which I think we should take ownership of responsibility for being summoned by Deputy President to go to a dialogue where we discuss coalition governance, where we've been in coalition with each other for a long time. It's a failure of leadership on our party and as opposition that we have not been able to work together properly in the areas and municipalities in which we govern. And that is something that we need to do as opposition. We can't come up with charters and moon packs and whatever we want to come up with if we're not even able to stand one another and each other when we work together at local government level. We must create and develop models at local government level that we can simply just take them to the national level. Yes, if the need for the coalition government arises at national level in 2024.
Mr. Swana, since I've been invited to bring you in here, what do you make of the EFF's absence? And we've spoken about an ANC-DA coalition. Another scenario is that the ANC and EFF nationally find each other, and that could also be a potential coalition.
At an earlier time, Steenhuisen declared the EFF enemy number one of the DA, and later on produced a list. I don't know if that list was genuine, but I saw a list of parties where it made a cross on those lists that if you vote for this party, you are voting for the EFF ANC coalition. So he produced what I call the list of enemies. Now, my understanding of that is that he actually formed a left-wing coalition just by doing that. Because basically those people knew that they are not wanted in the moonshot. Whether if you are a PAC, AZAPO, ATM, UTM, whatever you are, automatically is creating that crawl. The ANC just has to keep the gates open, and these people will walk in, and Steenhuisen is crawling them in. So the ANC didn't have to do anything about that. That was the DA. So the DA was the architect changing the landscape of South African politics just by that. And you will see that when they started these multi-party talks, they started trying to rebuke Steenhuisen for that partly, and also for this other issue that he's trying to be the boss of the whole thing. So to me,
Steenhuisen is not trying to be the boss of a Moonshot Pact short. Steenhuisen is the boss of Moonshot Pact short. Steenhuisen is the boss of this multi-party charter thing. Because if they reach 51 plus, Steenhuisen is going to be the one who's going to be the president. I don't think that is even a discussion there. I don't think it's not even a discussion. The DA it's in that coalition to lead. It is not in that coalition for the betterment of South Africa, for equality. No, the DA is in that coalition to lead. They concocted that multi-party thing so that they can lead South Africa. That's what they want. They want power.
The EFF had tried to say the ANC needs to go to the rehabilitation center probably. And the ANC has been saying that itself. If you look at the document of the new cadre, the document of Through the Eyes of the Needle, almost 23 years, 22 years ago. And we are starting to see them now saying, yeah, everybody who's going to get a position must first go through this neatly. But this document is more than 20 years old. They've not been doing that. They've allowed every criminal, every opportunist, careerist, and counter-revolutionary to take positions there. So the EFF, to the extent that it goes into that coalition, it has got a brother, perhaps an elder brother, that it has to rehabilitate.
Mr. Emam, I heard you responding to those insights. What is your view on this question, and are you concerned, just as with the ANC DA coalition, that an ANC EFF coalition would also effectively eliminate parties like yours from being part of a governing coalition?
Well, first of all, I want to say an ANC EFF government will be a national disaster in South Africa. And I can tell you the demands that will be made on the ruling party, the ANC, if they will be ruling at that stage, I can tell you, you're not going to be able to deal with that. That's the fact. You know, if you ask yourself why some of these coalitions have actually collapsed with the EFF and other political parties, that will basically tell you why I say what I say as far as the ANC EFF is concerned. But what is important to note, that what is being done by the so-called Moonshot Pact, which is now a multi-party coalition now, is they are creating an environment, as much as they don't want the ANC and EFF to work. And your analyst is absolutely correct. They don't have the numbers. And they have virtually closed their doors in terms of their approach to all the other parties. And that is now left open for the ANC and others to absorb them. So, really speaking, I can tell you, the opposition parties under this Moonshot Pact with the DA multi-party government is not going to achieve what they want. So the objective that they want to achieve, they're not going to do, but they're playing into the hands of the ANC EFF. But also, I think another point we need to note here is this.
And I'm going to ask you
There's
to
a level
here,
of
Mr.
Okay. Sorry.
Could I ask you to round off here?
Okay. There's a level of anxiety that is now being created in the broader black population of South Africa, where people are feeling uncomfortable. Are we now going to, based on what the DA and others doing, are we going to go back to the days of apartheid? Is this what it is all about? That might push a lot of black voters in this country to go back to vote for the ANC despite being unhappy. And that's the problem we can experience.
Ms. Mpofu-Walsh, let's round off with you.
Yes, one or two things. The first one is that, you know, the old saying about a lie so repeatedly told soon becomes the truth. This thing about the DA ANC coalition talks, I'm still on record about the fact that that there is no such a thing happening. If there
Stop lying, lady.
are corridor engagements in the corridors of Parliament or wherever they take place, those are not sanctioned officially. And I would say this to the analyst and whoever else has said that. But this is now on the record. But it doesn't mean that that will not happen into the future and so on. The second point, the ANC doesn't need the EFF for rehabilitation. that really is just it's actually, I don't know what, I can't even countenance. The ANC has got its own renewal program. The ANC has got its own pillars of the renewal program: fighting corruption, renewing the state, rebuilding institutions of democracy, and so on and so on. And we've got to be judged on how we are measuring up in terms of that program. But we certainly don't need any rehabilitation by a 10-year-old organization with the collective experience that we have. And I say this with utmost humility. We are looking forward to continuing to cultivate a very sound, mature engagement among political parties in South Africa. And that is the spirit in which we saw the convenership of that dialogue by the Deputy President, and hopefully that engagement can continue at the level of government.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank all my panelists for a fascinating and wide-ranging conversation this evening on South Africa's multi-party landscape.
So guys, what do you think about the conversation? What do you think is going to happen in 2024? Do you believe that John Steenhuisen might be the president of South Africa? Do you believe that the multi-party charter is going to unseat the ANC? Do you believe that the ANC will eventually work with the EFF, or do you believe that the ANC will eventually work with the Democratic Alliance to actually run South Africa? Don't forget to drop those comments in the comment section. Don't forget to hit that like button, and the most important part, guys, please subscribe. My name is Thomas Mabaso, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.